Hi everyone, welcome back to 365 Explained. We're going to do something a little bit different than what we have done in previous episodes. We've invited a special guest to talk through a subject that they are very well versed in.
That you've not forgotten what it's called, and you're not stalling for time.
No, definitely not forgot. It's infrastructure as code. That's what we're going to be talking about today. My name's Zach, and we've got Ben.
Hello, good to be here again, I think.
And then lastly, our special guest. Introduce yourself.
Cheers, Zach. Thanks for having me, guys. So my name is Elliott Woodruff. I'm principal architect at Synextra. I specialize these days in Azure and infrastructure as code, but I've spent the last decade or so working with Office 365 and Azure. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, great to have you. And yeah, like we alluded to, what we're going to be talking about today is infrastructure as code. So maybe that's a really great place to start. We are 365 Explained. So Elliott, what is infrastructure as code? What are we going to be talking about?
Cheers. So in the context of Azure, we'll stick to Azure and 365. So in the context of Azure, infrastructure as code is exactly what it says on the tin. So defining infrastructure components or configuration through code. So for the purposes of this, we'll talk about whether it's ARM, Bicep, or Terraform. So they're some of the tools that will be used. What this allows you to do is at the moment you would probably, or for most people, they go into a portal and they'll click around and make the configuration changes that they want to make and then test that that's going to work for them. When you define things through code or infrastructure or configuration, you're defining what the end state's going to be, and then the code will run and configure that. So most people have used PowerShell, especially if you're in the 365 world, you've definitely been using it.
Yeah.
PowerShell is running a command to make a change, and then there's a further change, and then you'll run line by line. When you start using things, so that's closer to infrastructure as code. When you start developing infrastructure as code skills, that is the end state, and it will make all of the changes required to get you to that end state. So rather than, for example, create a user, assign some properties to that user, then assign a group, and then do this, that, and the other, infrastructure as code would define all of it and then apply all of that at the same time. So it can be pretty useful.
So you kind of say, I need to have a database with this capacity for this reason, and then kind of figures that out, and you can do it on demand, right?
Yeah. So depending on which tool you use, it'll look at things like state. So if I said I wanted a virtual machine and I want some disks and a VNet and subnet and NSG and a VNet peer, for example, I can define all of that in maybe just one file, ideally more than one. Deploy it, and it'll go and deploy the whole thing. Whereas at the moment, if you went into the portal and you wanted to deploy a virtual machine, you'd first deploy the VNet, probably then the NSG, then you'd go back and deploy a virtual machine and click next through each of those.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why there's such a big difference is because in terms of speed, you've got a massive benefit there because you can deploy it straight away. But equally, the repeatability of it. So I know how to define a certain resource in a secure way, and it's done perfectly how the business wants. But when Bob comes along to do his work and he's going to click next, that's going to differ from the work that I've done. It might be that he's better than me, but he might not be as good as me.
So I was going to ask though, because you mentioned like repeatability. If you aren't like, if you're just needing to create a one-off thing, is it still worth using infrastructure as code to do that? I think it sounds like it is from your kind of corporate standards and compliance kind of point of view.
Yeah, it depends. Generally, the rule of thumb is 3. That's what I use anyway. So if we're going to deploy something more than 3 times ever, then it should be infrastructure as code. The only time I would say you should be deploying as infrastructure as code before that is if you want to develop your own personal skills. So you're trying to develop the skills within the team, then absolutely do everything in it. But the time required to create that code initially, say, for example, you wanted to deliver just a storage account in Azure, the time to do it in code is going to be longer than just creating it in the portal.
Okay.
But you're going to have defined what good looks like.
And from a scope point of view, we've talked about databases or VMs or storage or networks, that kind of stuff. Again, like our scope on this podcast is around Microsoft and Azure. In terms of what you can define through infrastructure as code in the Microsoft world, is that everything or anything in the Azure stack that you can deploy in this fashion, or is it limited to certain pieces of Azure?
Yeah, so three main tools. We've got Terraform, Bicep, and ARM. There's actually Pulumi as well, but for this. I won't dip into that. So for Bicep and ARM, they both rely on the ARM service resources. So
which is your resource manager.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And so they can deploy anything within that service. Any infrastructure configuration, any infrastructure resource, they can deploy all of them. Terraform's a little bit of an outlier because whilst it uses ARM, it also uses Graph API and can deliver to. There's over 3,000 providers now. So that is Bicep and ARM are Microsoft only.
Okay.
Terraform,
they're Microsoft produced tools, are they?
Yeah. So ARM being the original one, Bicep being the more human readable version of that.
Okay.
But then Terraform is multi-cloud but multi-platform. So that could do your VMware cluster in your data center. That could do AWS or GCP. But personally, I use it for Azure. I use it for some hybrid environments as well.
And if that's the third party, do you have to buy and license that to be able to use it, or
no? So HashiCorp are the company that developed Terraform, initially open source, has changed its licensing since it's been bought by IBM. But providing that you don't go over a certain limit, which I think is 10.4, you're absolutely okay to be using it in any context. So the current version of Terraform, you can only use not directly for profit. So you can't resell that service, but you can use it to deliver for clients.
Okay, so if you were like a hosting provider or something like that, you couldn't build your business off the back of the free version.
Yeah, there were a couple of companies that built like a front end portal that allowed you to type in some bits and it would go and deliver the infrastructure for you, and that would be against terms of service.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I've just got one question. So you've mentioned a couple of tools there: Terraform, Bicep, and ARM. If I'm someone that is interested in infrastructure as code, I've come across it. I mean, it's an acronym. People are going to come across it in their work. I'm familiar with Microsoft. I'm familiar with Azure. Where am I starting? Is it worth, you mentioned ARM and Bicep being, built or, coming from Microsoft. Do I start with them, then maybe look at something like Terraform, or can I just jump straight into Terraform?
I don't think there's not a learning curve for either of them. Or there is a learning curve, but they don't require each other. So if you want to start with Terraform, absolutely start with that. Generally, if you're going to be only in Azure and you don't want to go further than the resources being built, ARM is probably the way to go. Bicep. So ARM's the old one. Bicep's the replacement for it. So I wouldn't ever focus on ARM today.
Okay.
So if you're only going to stay in Azure and you don't want to do the application configuration, this is important to note, then stick with Bicep. If you want to go further than just your app service or your VM or whatever it is being built, then you might want to look at Terraform, because that can help you actually configure within containers. So like if you want to go a little bit further down the road and you're looking at AKS, so Kubernetes server, or you're looking at ACA, so container apps, or ACI, so container instance, you'll want to use Terraform to get that next level.
So it's stitching other pieces of the puzzle together where you need to, rather than just pure Microsoft land.
Yeah. So when we think about the Azure platform, think of it as a big data center. Great, we can deploy all the things to it, but they're going to need configuring at some point. So unless you've got your developers doing that or whatever else, then you're going to need some tools to do that. If you're going all the way to do infrastructure as code, may as well try and do as much of it as possible.
So kind of if you cast your minds back 10, 15, maybe so years, whenever PowerShell was nascent, Microsoft had this dictates that all of their new products and tooling needed to have a PowerShell, layer built into them in all commandlets. Is that where we are with Azure, that anything new appearing in Azure has to be compatible with ARM and Bicep and, by due process into therefore Terraform and the like, or are we in that weird state where some stuff does work, but only when it's been around for a little while? Or
yeah, it's a little bit better than the PowerShell days. So back in my Exchange and then Office 365 days, I came across exactly what you're talking about. PowerShell was pretty hit and miss. You could say that probably 70% of the thing you needed to do worked. And there was always a bit past that. So with ARM and Bicep, because they are what underpins the portal actually deploying the thing in the back end.
Okay.
So whatever gets deployed day one, whether it's in preview or it's in GA, there'll be ARM or Bicep available for it. It's a bit
like Microsoft is using that themselves to do their own provisioning and building.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly
Okay.
that. So that ARM is what has always historically been used for the portal to interact with the back end.
Yeah.
So you're clicking away and deploying your storage account. Behind the scenes of that web GUI is ARM.
Okay.
So they're always absolutely bang up to date. Now, Terraform's a little bit different. So the way that Terraform provider works is that they have to wait for the API to be exposed. So
Yeah.
it, in some cases, can be up to 3 months out of date. That is, however, changing because Terraform used to use ARM and now it's using the API endpoints. So the API endpoints are now being added by Microsoft at the time when Bicep is as well. So
Okay.
that means that Terraform, as we continue to move forward, will get closer and closer. Probably, I think if you expect to be about 3 months out of date, I think that's fine. If you're in a production environment and you're trying to deliver something that came out 2 months ago,
Yeah.
you're probably a bit close to the in quotes bleeding edge anyway.
Okay. So where do you get started with these things? Like, do you crack open notepads? Do you go to the Azure portal to upload a file? What do you do to actually start building a VM or a SQL or whatever it is? Where do we get started?
So depending on which service you're choosing or which tool you're choosing, there's different learning resources. The first thing would be to just generally understand how they work. And then how I've taught people in the past is I've actually got them to export the config of something that they already know. So
Okay.
I've used Storage Account before because it's one of the more simple resources. So we'll stick to that. So if you go into the portal today and you have a look at a storage account that's pretty basic, doesn't have a private endpoint or anything, and you go to export template, there's an option to export in ARM or Bicep.
Okay.
Now at a subscription level, you can actually enable Terraform export at the moment. That came out probably about a month ago at this point, and that would allow you to export as Terraform as well. So you get that file and you can see exactly what was configured. Now, if you're in the Terraform side of things, if you go to the Terraform registry, which is Terraform's, funnily enough, registry of resources that they provide, they give examples on how to deploy almost everything. Now, it's not advanced configuration; it's just the resource that will get deployed. But what you could do is you could take that, and then to your point about where you store it, it is a Notepad file. So it's a .tf file for Terraform. Bicep is, weirdly enough, .bicep. And ARM is .json or JSON files. The way that they should be managed and the way that you should start off is, and everyone can do this completely free charge, it doesn't need to be connected to your business, is set up a project within Azure DevOps or GitHub. And then you can start to use Git. So you would commit your files into one of those repos. And then as you iterate, you can keep that change record that you've been going through.
So you get automatic versioning on your files and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah. If you a little bit further down the line, if this is the first time you tried it, you're not going to be raising PRs and approving them and whatnot. But further down the line, that's what you'd want to be doing. And then all three of the tools include local compilers, so you could do local validation to check that the code's right. And then once you're at the point where you go, okay, this looks right, you can do a plan and then deployment. They differ slightly for each one of them, but yeah, they're pretty good.
So you get a little bit of kind of safety net of making sure you've not mistyped something or you're trying to do stuff that, I'm assuming if you're doing legitimate stuff that's bad, it will still let you, but it's protecting you a little bit from stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the PowerShell thing. You could do like get dash all users and pipe it to remove all users.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to tell you like that's perfectly valid. You're okay. I'm assuming it's a similar sort of a thing, but it's making sure the commandlet names or whatever names are correct and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you have to treat it with a lot of care. So for ARM and Bicep, there's a what if flag. You should absolutely be using that, especially in your early days when you're not 100% sure what you're doing. There's a critical difference between the two sides. So Terraform has state, so it's a stateful service. Now, what that means is that it knows what it last deployed, and it knows to go and check what's in Azure, and then tells you the difference between what you've got and what you're going to deploy. Bicep and ARM don't do that. So there's a little bit of a risk with Bicep and ARM that when you deploy, if you've not done a what if, that you could delete or change an existing resource.
Okay, that's interesting.
Whereas Terraform will say, when you do Terraform plan, because you should never just apply, will output, here's all the changes that your code's going to make. Are you sure you want to do this? If you do, run this command. There's a little bit of a safety net there. Now, Terraform's more complex by design, but it means that you get those sort of guardrails, I guess is probably the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
You mentioned these registries in Terraform. Started as open source, like you said, now been bought by IBM. Are these registries community driven, or is it all going through Terraform? So you mentioned, with Microsoft, the graph APIs and, that stuff's speeding up, but are we still relying on Terraform to release these out into the registry?
No, so they do their own work, but a lot of it's community driven. So for example, I'm trying to think of one of the big ones that came up recently. I think it was for virtual WAN, the routing intent wasn't configurable. So loads of people, obviously everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are now using V1.
Yeah.
Loads of people piled into GitHub to raise requests and then eventually turned into an issue and a problem and then it's been resolved. But it's community driven, so people will raise PRs for solutions. Ultimately, it's them that get to accept. They don't have to take what the community does. But if enough people talk about something or come up with a decent solution, they'll implement it. Who wouldn't, right? Free work. I'd let the community build some solution for me if they wanted to.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's kind of like add-ons in video games, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
If it's community driven, eventually it'll get dragged into the actual product itself, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know we've had a few of these kind of peppered through this discussion already, but let's really hit on the kind of benefits of infrastructure as code. Like, why are we not just letting people, go out and create their VMs and SQLs themselves? Why are we bothering to talk about IaC?
Yeah. So for IaC, there's a couple of major points for it, right? If you've got a really small environment, let's say you've got 3 VMs and a little bit of storage, and that's kind of all you've got, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not going to change your business at all. But if you've got high change rate, multiple environments, or you've got maybe quite a complex environment that you need to keep security tabs on, then these are like the 3 main ones where you're going to massively win. A lot of the work I do these days is with developers, and the developers need to be able to deploy very quickly. Don't care too much about what's going on the infrastructure level, care more about the code just being delivered. So from an infrastructure team's point of view and a security team's point of view, you can create all the infrastructure requirements that they have. You can have them defined in modules, making sure that they're repeatable, and then get them out very quickly. So if you think about just one application, you've got a small web app with some storage, and there's nothing that crazy going on, maybe PostgreSQL database or something. If you've got 5 environments, that's quite a lot to go and click through and do. So if you define that as code, deliver that into development, by the time you've got to prod, you know that all of the environments are exactly the same. So whatever works in dev should absolutely be working in prod. So
how does this scale cross-tenant? Is that one of the kind of advantages here as well, that we're not just repeatable inside an environment, we can kind of take that sideways into other environments as well?
Yeah, it's something that I don't really talk a lot about because I'm always working with clients. So internally, you get loads of benefits. But actually, externally, if you're either managing many tenants or you're an MSP, this is a really key one, and you're coming up with products, you can create infrastructure as code that you can deliver a whole product to a client. So that means, I could take 3 clients that I've got at the moment. I know that they've all got the same thing. They've got it in exactly the same way, and there's going to be no misconfiguration. Like small things like naming's going to be right. The security is going to be right. They're all going to have tags. I don't have to worry about any of that being wrong. So at an organizational level, you've got many tenants across the globe. You know they're all going to be the same. And then for an MSP, that benefit is, well, now my product is cheaper, it's more secure by design, and I can get it out to all of my customers quicker. So we're currently developing a AI Foundry like accelerator. The idea being that everyone wants to use it at the moment. There are some security risks with it. So we're going to define what good looks like in code, and then for a very small price, just deploy it into all of our clients. Because if they want it, that's fine, but we don't want to spend like 20, 30, 40 days doing consultancy for this. We want to just do some engineering and get it out.
I guess supportability as well, right?
Yeah,
You support desk having, you mentioned the naming conventions, but that's such a big one. Even even at Loop Up an hour, we're calling auto attendants and call queues different names around customers and trying to figure that out. But make sense around all products that are sold.
Yeah, I do quite a lot of FinOps work as well. And in the FinOps space, it sounds ridiculous, really, but the naming and the tagging is massively important, because trying to find out who owns a product or a service that's 2 years old once it was deployed and those people have left and had 4 jobs since, it's impossible. So if it's all code, we know not only what tag it's got, but who committed it to the repo, when that pipeline ran, everything about it. We've got all.
And that's back to your good practice, isn't it? It's like, as long as it isn't a JSON file on someone's desktop, then it is all back in a GitHub or somewhere.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, you end up with a more like mature environment as a result of it.
You've talked a few times around some of the benefits of security, because it means like we know how stuff's configured, that it's meeting our standards. Does this open another kind of worms that needs to be addressed around things like, well, how are we handling account management or secrets inside those things that we're deploying? Are they all in plain text in the files that we've got somewhere on a GitHub that maybe other people can access? Like, what are the considerations there?
Yeah, so you do have to be careful, first off. So things like the state file for Terraform, and I always go back to Terraform because out of the 3, it's personally my favorite. I know Bicep very well, but Terraform's what I would choose to use. So Terraform has a state file. In that state file, if you put plain text passwords, they'll get committed to state. So that state should never be in a repo.
Okay.
What we do with state is it actually goes into backend. So we'd use a storage account and it goes into a blob container, and then we secure that through other means. In terms of things like API keys, connection strings for SQL databases, stuff like that, what we actually do is we mark them as a sensitive value, or we should mark them as a sensitive value within Terraform. They should go straight into a key vault, and then the thing that's going to read them reads them from the key vault instead.
So it hooks into some of that other stuff Microsoft have got around securing those things as well.
Yeah. So instead of you outputting a string that says API key 123 it as a value, and it's going to get stored somewhere, all it would do is it would go key vault dash API key dash ID, and it's going to reference that instead. So it's useless to anyone that could find it.
Okay.
But you do have to be careful, because a lot of people don't realize that repos generally out of the box public, or can be public very easy.
Because I guess it's no different to other stuff, but you're potentially painting a big target for like, this is how all our stuff's built.
Yeah.
But you just take the appropriate care and consideration with it, like you would with anything else.
Yeah. GitHub is seen as like, or even GitLab, are seen as like the cool ways to do things. Like, I'm a developer, I use GitHub, but actually I still use ADO. It's the older fashioned version, but is secure natively.
In your tenant boundaries.
Yeah. So to make like a public repo in ADO is a lot harder. To make it in GitHub, when you're creating the repo, it's a checkbox that you might have clicked by accident.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So another question I had, you mentioned kind of Kubernetes, if I'm saying that correctly, and, like similar things like Docker and what have you, where you have the ability to provision stuff on demand. So I think you touched on this a tiny bit. Is that something that we can offer through this as well? A scenario where developers need stuff. Like, I'm assuming that's an add-on module, or that's just a core bit of functionality that we get here.
So it depends which bit you're talking about. Do you mean the resource or the config within it?
Or just being able to provision stuff on demand and
yeah, got you. So Terraform, we talked about declaring resources through code. So that's like you open up Notepad, you type a load of stuff, and then you use that to deploy. The other way of doing it is you define what a thing is. Now, a thing, and I'll use the right terminology here, a module, as it's called within the Terraform world, and actually Bicep as well now, is a collection of resources that you just pass parameter files to, and it'll deploy the whole thing. That sprouted out a term of resource vending. So this is where you can say to a developer, we know that you always deploy this application for our clients. It's got 3 web apps, it's got a load balancer, it's got traffic manager, this, that, and the other. Let's say it comes to like 20, 30 resources by the end of it. You can say, okay, well, now, Mr. Developer or Mrs. Developer, you don't need to worry about the configuration or the deployment of those. What you need to do is call this module and provide it with these 6 variables, and it'll do everything for you.
Yeah.
But then in your pipeline, their build phase is they almost don't think about it. They've got a small TFRs file that just gives those little bits. Maybe it's the tenant ID, a subscription, client name, and something tag related. If you did just those, you could deploy a massive application with no effort. And then they, as a developer, can focus on the bit that they're paid to do, the bit that adds huge value, developing the solution.
And the flip side of that then is what sort of methods or tooling is there to stop sprawl of this kind of stuff? So you can actually see what's been deployed, what's in use, what's not in use. Is there ways of tidying this stuff up?
You have to be careful, because especially through many repos, if you have duplication of modules, you end up in a world of pain. What we do is, or what I've always done for quite a while now anyway, is I have a central repo for modules that people reference, and then they can reference a commit version. So I will issue, I don't know, let's say 1.1 of a key vault. And then in 6 months, if you still want to use 1.1, you can go and use it. That'll be referenced in your code. But equally, you might be on version 4 by that point.
But that's kind of for your building bricks kind of stuff, right? What about the Terraform or Bicep? Do they just see all of the stuff in your Azure environment and you still have to manage and maintain those through whatever your other tooling is? This is all just about deployment? Or is there any lifecycle management of components in there as well?
I see what you mean.
Of the things that are deployed.
Yeah. So once deployed, managing it long term. So let's say we want to update the tag. Again, a basic thing, but we want to update a tag.
Yeah.
We can do that in Terraform. That's not a problem. You can do it in Bicep and ARM as well. It's just that the visuals aren't quite the same.
Yeah.
If I go back to that key vault and I say, okay, well, now there's a new access policy. I want to add Elliott as a secret admin or something like this. I can add that into code and it'll go run off and redo it. The danger, and this is where you need to decide what you're going to do, is that if you've made changes in the portal and then you rerun code over it, it's going to try and remove those changes that you've made.
Okay.
Because it's going to turn you back to what your in quote base was.
It's kind of overlapping with the DSC, the desired state config kind of thing of this is the way we think it should look, so I'm going to make it look like that.
Yeah. You'll get a warning that it's going to remove a load of settings, but you don't want to take away the CEO's access to, I don't know, Reader or something like that you didn't know.
So, kind of speaking of DSC, again, we're more in the 365 space in theory here. What sort of overlap is there with, this is all infrastructure and infrastructure related things. What about the Office 365 or the M365 kind of actual application configuration? Is there overlap there, or do we need to be looking at other tooling?
There is, and it's continuing to get better. So from a native infrastructure as code, though not really infrastructure, we can already manage Entra. So we can manage users, groups, therefore licenses, subscriptions. We can manage things like service principals already as well. But then as you go, okay, well now I've got all this really cool stuff in Azure. So all my infrastructure and my applications are nice and well set up. But actually 365, I've still got a help desk that are manually clicking things and changing tenant settings. And that doesn't really sit well with a lot of businesses that have gone to all that effort. So there is also the option of using DSC for Microsoft, which is a open source co-developed solution, which allows you to make changes at a tenant level and then export the change. So you would say, this is the configuration of my tenant. So things like external sharing, federated domains, that kind of thing. And you export that, and then you could import that at a later date.
Okay.
That's really useful because if you put that into a pipeline, you export it to the repo on day one. So you've deployed your new tenant and you go, right, I'm happy now. This is RV1. You export it, you put it into a pipeline and you say, right, any change to this code, because now you can update the code that you exported, can run the pipeline and then we'll make changes to the tenant.
Okay.
So rather than someone saying, okay, I want to start sharing with Elliott's domain, so we're gonna federate with Elliott. Instead of going and doing it in the portal, you could go and do it in code and then have the pipeline update the tenant. That on a single tenant doesn't have as much benefit. It basically allows you to just get back to that day one, which might be a benefit depending on how likely you think it is that people are going to make changes. But where there's a massive benefit is you go, this is what good looks like. Either I've got many tenants or I'm an MSP, and I'm going to take what my good is and I'm going to give it to tenant number 2 and 3 and so on. So that can have huge benefits. And then if you can get to that point, the stuff that you would need to manage manually is tiny.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be. It's
And that's back to the benefits that we've talked about kind of reducing the amount of manual effort, reduces misconfiguration, and all the stuff we've kind of, it's got all the benefits we've talked about, right?
Yeah, generally the stuff that you're going to be doing in your tenant is low skill but high impact in terms of like tenant changes. It doesn't take a lot of skill to go and change a drop down from like yes to no, or a switch from yes to no. But the person that's going to have to do that is going to have to be really highly skilled to understand what the impact is.
Yeah.
It means you've probably got your best and brightest in your teams focusing on quite trivial things that could just be a click of a button.
Yeah.
So if you extrapolate that into code, then they could go and update the code and it would update 10 tenants. So they've not had to do that thing 10 times. So from a cost point of view, security point of view, it just makes sense.
Yeah. So
yeah, coming up towards the end of the chat now, just one question for me is around where do you see the future of this, Elliott? Where are we heading? Where are we going? I mean,
Copilot will do it all for us, right?
Exactly. We've talked a whole podcast and not mentioned Copilot yet, which is definitely not like us.
I was legally obliged to slip it in. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll answer the questions in two parts, right? So where do I think it's going to go? Infrastructure as code's not going to go anywhere. People want standardization. It's probably going to go a little bit further and more technical than it is today. So we're already seeing that Terraform is now using the MS Graph endpoint. So direct API access, truer, more up-to-date services, and that's going to continue. I wouldn't be surprised if we get to a point where all admins are in a position where they have to do things in code for compliancy. Just like ISO accreditation, it makes way more sense to be going down that route. So I think at least over the next maybe 2 to 5 years, you'll just see that continue to increase. Now, one of the dangers for infrastructure as code, and people don't like talking about dangers with AI, is that AI makes everyone a genius right up until the point they've not understood what they've done and they've deployed that AI code.
Sorry, you're correct. That SQL Server did exist. My bad.
Yeah, exactly. So if people are always going to leverage AI for code, because actually, like GitHub's Copilot is incredible. Like, if you understand what you're trying to achieve, it's amazing at it. But the danger of it is that people will see infrastructure as code as the silver bullet that's going to fix all their problems, and they will start to leverage AI to develop the infrastructure as code. By doing that, they could, like to the point we've been making, they could easily blow away a tenant, accidentally blow away a load of resources, and not have realized what they've done. When it's in code, you don't get the, "Are you sure, mister? You're about to destroy your SQL database. Are you sure you want to do this?"
Yeah. It's not something I'd vibe code. I don't think I'd go and vibe code some Terraform state configuration files.
In your dev tenant for practice,
Yeah. So we tend to deploy sandbox subscriptions for clients. If they want to learn any infrastructure as code at the end of projects, we'll give them the skills to do that, and we'll give them a sandbox tenant. We wouldn't tenant or subscription. We wouldn't necessarily tell them to do tenant level things, but I guess they could if they wanted to. So where it will get is Terraform's code will get better. IBM have bought it. They've obviously bought it to make a lot of money. They wouldn't have bought it just for the fun of it. So they will leverage their own AI services in it at some point. It will get closer to human language. So you'll ask it to just deploy some things for you instead. And HashiCorp have already made it very clear that AI integration with Terraform is where they're going. In terms of Bicep, it's Microsoft. So Bicep is going to have Copilot all over it, right at the beginning to the end of it. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with the Azure portal Copilot giving us Bicep. That would be pretty likely, and maybe it'll even run it for you rather than go into a pipeline.
Yeah, the thing that worries me with stuff like that is the kind of AI hallucinations, and the amount of times where I've talked to Copilot or an AI service and talked about PowerShell or commandlets, and it's just made one up.
Yeah,
and I've been like, well, that doesn't exist, and it's like, oh yeah, you're correct, that doesn't exist, sorry about that. And it's like, what?
It'll definitely get better. But
Yeah.
it's a storyteller. So forget about the fact that we're talking technical. The job of AI is to keep you entertained, keep you talking to it. Self-preservation. So if it doesn't know the answer to something, it's still going to give you an answer, whether it's right or wrong.
Very
Sounds
true.
like-
It'll
Yeah.
change. It'll change. It'll always.
But that again's back to that, if IBM are developing it or whatever, like you end up with the more focused agents in their particular field.
Yeah.
And then, Copilot and Grok and GPT become the orchestrators that talk to the specific agents that do know what they're doing with that kind of stuff. But that's the 2-year, 3-year thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think.
Or 6 months of this pace of change.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think GitHub's Copilot does so well because, okay, it uses loads of the providers to begin with anyway. When it uses things like Claude, it's really good.
Yeah.
But it's GitHub. There's a lot of public repos that they've got a lot
Yeah.
of skills from. So I think using the right AI tool for the right thing is what you should be doing. I think Microsoft's Copilot is really good at Microsoft type stuff. Personally, I don't use it for development. I use different AI for different things, but it'll get there, I'm sure.
So just before we kind of wrap up, I've got a question to finish on for you. But in terms of the chat we've had so far, is this a reasonable wrap up? So infrastructure as code, as we have been talking about it, is a way of provisioning any of the resources in the Azure stack in a repeatable fashion through some form of, tooling, be that Terraform or Bicep, where they have configuration files underneath. You should definitely be looking at using Git or some sort of repo for providing structure around those things. And you need to take considerations of the security of what you are doing and the versioning and the change control around what you're doing. But that is where you then get a whole bunch of benefits around repeatability and reliability of these kinds of things. Is that a reasonable kind of summary of the last 30 minutes we've been?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I mean, look, not anything, but a lot of things can be infrastructure as code. Way more things than we talked about today.
Yeah.
But if you already know PowerShell, you're kind of on the road to infrastructure as code anyway. If you get enough PowerShell commands where get VM or new VM or AZ VM, you can go and build whatever you want in PowerShell today. That is infrastructure as code. It's just not defining the code.
Okay.
If you store that in IaC, you could deploy it from there. That's still the same thing. But for people wanting to start, you're either doing it because it's a skill that you want to have on your CV, or you're doing it because you think there's a benefit to the business. If you're like an infrastructure guy today, I mean, everyone's known this for a while, but if you're deploying VMs today and just clicking through them and it's taking you like half a day to get that VM online, you are probably wasting a good portion of your day. And there's other more exciting stuff you could be doing. So as whether developer, infrastructure, security, whatever it is, there are easier, better ways to move faster and be more secure. We've all had days where we've not had enough coffee in the morning and we've made a bit of a mistake in the portal, right? You can just take all of that away and go, okay, well, it's infrastructure code. Don't worry about it.
So now you can make a mistake in one line of code and blow the whole thing up, right? Instead.
Well, if you use the right tool, you've got the right pipelines, then you can avoid it. But yeah, you could.
So that's my ending question then is in two parts. What is best thing you have seen done using infrastructure as code, and what is the worst thing you have seen done using infrastructure as code?
Okay, best thing. I can't name names for any reasons, but
it's Zach.
It wasn't me. Would have been the best if it was me.
Oh no, sorry, we were on best. Yeah.
I was involved in a how do I term this? An aerial surveillance solution that was across 3 clouds that we deployed into development, and it took 4 months to get it into development. And then by the time we got to prod to roll it out, it took 2 hours. And that solution costs, I think it's £140,000 a month. So that is like huge infrastructure deployment in like 2 hour deployment. And that's the app being deployed or multiple apps being deployed.
But that's giving you an idea of the scales of savings of time and effort and all that kind of.
Yeah, we were providing it as consultancy as well. So if we'd done 3 or 4 months with smoke testing as a team, we would have been in the hundreds of thousands for the amount of people that were involved. So yeah, that's probably the best. The worst thing I've ever seen. So I mentioned a couple of times that Terraform has state. State is highly fragile, should never be opened unless you're very, very skilled and you know what you're doing. A client of mine a couple of years back manually edited Terraform state to try and update it from dev to prod, which just isn't a thing at all. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, joking. They deleted a production database by messing around with state file. So if you ever see a file that says .tf state, don't touch it, don't mess with it at all.
Leave it alone. All right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you ever so much for joining us.
No.
Where can people get in touch with you, find you? What else do you do?
Well, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I write a lot of articles, do some videos and some fun stuff as well. But yeah, it's definitely the best place to see what I'm doing.
So you're Elliott LW on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, Elliott_LW, I think it is.
Okay.
No,
I've just connected to the wrong person then.
No, it's Elliott LW then. Unless there's a clone of me somewhere.
Well, hey, we're all just code.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's loads of me.
Good stuff. Where can people find us, Zach, if they want to be involved or come on as a guest?
Find us on 365 Explained on YouTube or 365 Explained on any of your favorite podcasting platforms, or reach out to me, Zach Bennett or Ben Lee on LinkedIn, and we'll have a chat. Thank you very much for coming on, Elliott. And it's been great having you.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'll catch you soon.
Catch you another time. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.